I'm Cynthia James, and this network is about changing lives one woman at a time. Welcome to Women Awakening. This is Cynthia James, and I am your host. I get the honor of bringing to your home, to your space, women that are inspiring to me, women that are making a difference on the planet, women that have said yes to their soul's guidance, because I believe it's a time of women emerging. And so what I get to do is bring to you so that you can see, sense, and feel women that have stepped forward, that have found their courage to say yes to their life. And so I'm grateful that you're here. We're on a lot of platforms, Spotify and iTunes and YouTube and anywhere there are podcasts. Just subscribe. I do these every week, and you will not be disappointed. Every woman is amazing. So my guest today is Tigrilla Gardenia. Her journey began in a polyethnic childhood. She earned a degree in music and electrical engineering, and we'll talk about that. Entering high tech via RealNetworks and Microsoft in the early days of the internet. And the desire to escape the confines of the corporate world proved too strong, and Tigrilla soon began following her own spiritual path. So she co-owned a circus, produced intentional dance events, taught Kabbalah, and even toured with Cirque du Soleil. Whoa. Today, she is a nature-inspired mentor and leadership coach. Her studies focus on plant intelligence, the effects of plant music on human health, social innovation, and ecosystem thinking. She has the honor of being a Damanhur citizen in Italy. I have been there many times, and how wonderful that she lives there and gets to be in that energy every day. And Tigrilla is a world ambassador of plant intelligence and champions connection to nature as the basis of long-term health, happiness, and success. Tigrilla, welcome. I'm so grateful that you're here.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, I just want to start. Okay, multi-ethnic. How did you grow up? Because it's interesting that you first stepped into music and technology. So how'd you grow up?
So I grew up in, as you can tell, even though I live in Italy, I'm not Italian, I'm American, but I'm actually Cuban American. So I grew up in South Florida in Miami, which anybody who's been to Miami, especially my generation, knows that it was really North Cuba. So I'm actually Cuban. My parents were both, Cubans. So a lot of people ask me here, like, which one of your parents was Cuban? I'm like, both. That's why I'm Cuban American. And so the beauty of growing up in South Florida in the time that I did, and especially Miami, was the fact that we were able to live both cultures fully. I never felt like I had to sacrifice being American for being Cuban or vice versa. We celebrated, the day of Jose Marti just alongside Thanksgiving. And in my family in particular, we embraced every aspect of both cultures fully. Language, music, food. You could go down any street in Miami and enjoy both of those depending on where you are. And I think that informed the idea that, to me, duality never had to be mixed or separated out. Like, everything was mixed in. You didn't have to separate things out. And so when I got to the chance to study, and I was doing when I was going to college, after some experimentation, I realized that, well, wait a minute, like, I love music, I love math. Why don't I bring those two together and do music engineering and electrical engineering?
Well, that's incredible. So you must have a very strong linear brain that understands big concepts, which I love. So you were at the beginning of the internet, RealNetworks and Microsoft. And how was that, not only being there, but being a woman there?
Yeah, the being a woman part was an interesting aspect, to be honest, and something that in some ways we didn't even realize that there was a problem because we were so deep in it in some aspects. I mean, on one hand, I have to say that there was a lot of women in tech. Like, my first boss when I came into RealNetworks, which back then was called Progressive Networks, it hadn't even evolved into RealNetworks, was a woman. But you almost didn't realize, because there was a fair amount of women, that the women only reached so far up and that there was a glass ceiling. And I remember one time having a conversation, what I ended up getting very lucky to have had sort of, I don't know if it was an insight or how, I ended up looking for a mentor, not just in my career, like from the perspective of a career mentor, but actually a female mentor too. I looked for what were the highest women at Microsoft that I could become that I could be a mentee of, so that I could understand and learn their journey. But they were only so far up. And when you would talk to them about it, even they didn't see the glass ceiling because they were immersed in it. They were convinced that the men above them had, for whatever reason, other qualifications. So it was a very different time than it is now, where I think there's a much greater understanding that the play field is not level, and that we're not playing with the same deck to a certain extent. Back then, honestly, we thought we had it all. And then all of a sudden we just stop, and you're like, wait a minute, why is that person getting promoted? I remember a boss of mine, a wonderful boss that I had, who literally came to me one day and said, I just want you to know, you're about to hire somebody who's going to work for you and is going to make more money than you. He literally told me this. And he justified it by saying that this person was a type of automation engineer that I wasn't. But it never even occurred to me to ask him, going, wait a minute, how does that work? Like, we were so taught that it was like, that's the way it is.
Yeah. So clearly you were successful there, but I want to know, what was the moment when you said, this is not my soul path?
Yeah.
And went off in this other direction? What happened?
So what happened was, as having a degree in both music and engineering, like in other words, it's within the School of Music, the arts is extremely important to me, that creativity, because as much as I can be very analytical and linear, it is within a creative realm that I am the most structured, if that makes any sense.
Totally.
And when I first got to Microsoft, I had left RealNetworks, I had a non-compete, I ended up going into some other kinds of technology. And as much as I loved what I was doing, that need for that creative spark was missing. So I, was taking voice lessons again, and I was singing, I was doing theater, and I was really exploring different artistic paths. And I met a group. I ended up auditioning for what I thought was a play. It turned out to be a performance in the middle of this intentional dance party, which I had no idea about. I guess it's kind of like the evolution of the rave. It was where the rave turned into something spiritual. And this particular group had developed an entire tarot deck, and each event embodied one of the archetypes in the card. Wow. And so I came into this event to perform in the midnight, what's called performance. So it was a performance that was really a prayer to the overall archetype we were embodying. And I got to know these people while I was preparing for this. I was still working at Microsoft, and I just kept looking at them going, people actually live like this, immersed in this much creativity, immersed in this much freedom. I had been kind of taught, you go to the university, you get a good degree, you get a great job. And I had all of those, check, check, check. I had the husband who had a standard plan, who knew what we were going to be doing for the next 15 years, check, check, check. But I didn't have that complete creative freedom. And it was the day of the performance, and my husband looked at me and he's like, do you want me to go with you? And I looked at him and I said, no. And I don't know if I'm coming home. And after that, the next 6 months, as I became more involved with this community and also with the overall kind of more creative community that existed, I realized that as much as Microsoft was good to me, and as much as I really did enjoy the work I was doing, this wasn't where I wasn't going to be able to fulfill my life purpose. I wasn't going to be able to express myself as a full creative as well as technical being. And so after the next performance that we had, which was a festival that I helped coordinate, because at this point I was becoming really involved, I came into the office on the Monday morning and I looked at my boss and I said, you've just got my 2 weeks notice. I'm like, this isn't the life I want. So I left my husband, I left the work, and I decided to just explore what it was to be a creative being again. And okay. Again, with a good structure, but still a creative being.
Right. Okay. So this is good. So was any part of you afraid? Was any part of you saying, okay, how am I going to support myself? How am I, was there any part of you that was having that feeling?
You know what's interesting? Over the last, 15 years, over 15 years now, since I started this journey, moving away from that corporate life, there was two things that really, I think, didn't make me have the doubts. The first one was the fact that I had the experience, the great career, the diplomas, the things that I needed. And in my mind, I always said to myself, well, if this doesn't work for me, I can always come back. I didn't burn any bridges on my way out the door. I didn't leave because even though I did, my second to last boss really didn't like me very much, if I'm really honest, but that wasn't why I was leaving. I was leaving because this wasn't what I wanted to do. And so in my mind, I was like, well, I can always come back. And the other thing was, I'm just really good with money. I'm very, it's not that I'm frugal, but I'm good at saving money. And in my life, I had been shown, that I knew how to take care of myself and take care of my money and all those types of things. And that just gave me that security blanket that I needed to be a little bit more crazy. But the truth of the matter is, a lot of it was just truly believing that I knew I could come back. I know I'd get a job in some department, either at Microsoft or one of the other tech companies in the area. So I was like, why not try?
Okay. All right. So, but you are a born leader, clearly. I mean, you own a circus, you do Cirque du Soleil, you create events. I mean, I just want to know, was this call, this spiritual creative call, did it just keep opening doors for you? Is that what happened? Or did you create the doors?
I feel like I created the doors because honestly, I didn't grow up I think it's a lot of it is mindset and the way that you look at the world. And when I was 15 years old, my first boyfriend said to me something that I'll never forget and has always shaped the way I look at it. He's like, if you try something and you fail, you don't get it. And if you don't try, you don't get it. So you got nothing to lose.
Right.
And that was like the thing. I was like, wow. So I never even noticed I was taking risks because to me, they were progressions. Like I would see an opportunity. So for example, with this organization that I eventually started producing events with, it was really because I started to work with an artist who was part of that. And then one day he was producing an event and the person he was doing it with fell through. So he looked at me and he's like, hey, can you help me? And I went to help him. And when I was helping him, I was like, oh, we could do this and we can do that. And what if we change this? And what if we change that? And he was like, you're hired. And I was like, hired or what? He's like, you're my new business partner. And I was like, oh, okay, let's try. And the other thing was practical experience. When I did my undergraduate, which is a very safe environment, anybody who's in a university knows that universities can be safe in some ways to experiment with. I did 3 internships because I wanted to really get to know people. I wanted to understand what were the possibilities. I really wanted to expand as much as possible my experience. So that's I think probably why I'm good with money. I prefer an experience over an object. And those experiences is really what I think opened a lot of doors, or at least gave me the tools in front of me that I was then able to mix and match. The thing I'm good about is, and this is what I do with a lot of my clients, is I'm really great at mixing and matching things that don't seem to make sense or look like they should go together. But I tend to see in the natural world, we call it the deep pattern. It's the real essence of what these things are supposed to be. And so that's how they interlock together in order to create something unexpected.
I love that. Well, and that leads me to Damanhur. And so it's really interesting to me. You are one of those people that's a both and. Oh, I'll do music and I'll do engineering, and I'll own a circus and then I'll create events. And now I'll be a leadership coach and I will become a Damanhurian citizen. So for those of you who never heard about Damanhur, I would invite you to look it up. And it's like a magical, mystical place in Italy between Turin and Milan. And the temples of humankind are there. And it's really like art on steroids with spirit infused in every little fiber. So I want to know, first of all, how'd you get to Damanhur? And were you already a leadership coach when you got there, or did that develop?
That developed. So how I got there is actually, I'll give you a very, very brief kind of history. So I leave the United States on a tour with Cirque du Soleil because my partner at the time says to me, I really want to work for Cirque. He was one of my techs. And I said, great, we're going to make it happen. And I devised an entire plan to clear our karma and clear us of attachments so that he could get this job and we could go. And that was really opening doors on my own. Like, I was just like, we need to clear the attachments. We need to get rid of all this stuff. We need to clear up any debt. We need to do all these things so that when the call comes, we can just get on a plane and go. And so that was what brought me initially to Europe. A series of things happened while I was here. At the time, I was also teaching. I was still producing events in the US and I was teaching Kabbalah. And so I was able to, when I left Cirque du Soleil, I was able to then just move into that. And I was living in Barcelona at the time. I came to Damanhur on a whim with a group of friends because being a spiritual teacher, I had heard of it. And my best way of explaining to what Damanhur is to people, besides the fact that it's one of the largest spiritual eco communities in the world, but more than anything, it's Hogwarts for adults. That's how I think of it. It's like living in Hogwarts. And so I came to visit. And I met some people here, and some of them were like, "Oh, you should really come. We have such a need for your skill set." And I was like, "No. Like, if I was to live with other people, I would kill somebody. So no, that's not."
Okay, wait a second, because what you all don't know is that they have these things called nucleos, and where 15, 20 people in different generations live together as community. Okay, go ahead.
Exactly. And so I was like, no. But through a series of events, my roommate at the time tells me, I'm leaving the country, so you have to find a new place to live. I get a call that says, hey, I've convinced the people who are kind of in charge of the social aspects of Damanhur to give you 6 months, kind of like come and live with us, do a work exchange with us for 6 months. And then help us build out our social media platform. Because obviously doing events and producing things and producing events and doing courses and everything, you have to get really good at social media. If not, as you know very well, you ain't going to go anywhere. And so I had amassed, based on my tech experience, a lot of knowledge of like the whole world of marketing and social media and things like that. So I was like, well, I'll go for 6 months and then I'll come home. And that was over 10 years ago. So I really came with the intention of going back to Barcelona. That was where I wanted to be. That was where I thought I was going to be. But when I got here, I ended up working on, I redid the website. I did, if you see our Facebook page, that was something I created. The blog was something I created. Like, there was a whole series of things. And as I was doing all this, I was getting more and more immersed in like the spiritual aspect. And I had been a solo practitioner. I was very into esoteric arts. Like I said, I taught Kabbalah, and all of a sudden to have this community of people to be able to share this spirituality and perform shared rituals was so enriching that I discovered that I actually really liked living in community. I loved the house with, like, you go out and have dinner and there's like always at least 6 to 10 to sometimes 20 people to talk to. And this really started to create this environment for me that after 3 months, I was like, that's it. This is home. This is where I'm staying. And I've got it. And this is where I am.
Well, and it's magical. And, I mean, like I said, I've taken groups there, and 17 people with me went through a 3-year mystery school there. I mean, it's just exquisite. And I want to talk about the plants because I've considered myself a person who loves nature, but I didn't really understand the aliveness of it. And I was in Damanhur and I was walking down this hall and I'm hearing this sound and I'm thinking, what is that? And as I walk down this hall and I get closer to the end, the sound changes. But when I get down there, there's nothing there but a plant. And I look around and then I go, could that be the plant? And I move back and the sound changes. And then I move in and the sound changes. And that just blew my mind, because they had this instrument where they could track the sound. And then we found out that you could do it all over in the woods there. So I want to know how you got into that. And because if you were like me, my mind was blown that they have frequencies and sound.
Yeah, and my experience was really similar to what you just described. I was walking down that hall and I heard that music and I kept looking for it, and I traced it down to a speaker that was connected to a box, and the box was connected to a plant. And I was like, what is this? And the thing that happened inside of me was probably because, again, I'm a musician and an engineer. And so the box was both. But more than anything, I love languages. So I speak multiple languages. I come from a polyethnic background. So I love the idea of culture and language. And when I was standing there in front of this plant, it was as if the plant was talking to me. Mm. Like the music was words to a certain extent. And I just was like, are you talking to me? Wait a minute, is the plant talking to me? And that was really the feeling. And so it opened up an entire world of the idea of plant communication and of, like you just said, it lifted immediately the veil of plant blindness. And plant blindness is something that most people struggle with, because even if you love nature, you still don't see everything that plants do for us or everything that plants are. But as I listened to this, and there's a beautiful quote, I was speaking with somebody once who's a musicologist who was explaining to me that we tend to think of music as a language, but in reality, language is a musicality, because music came first. And so that was, I heard it, I understood it, that plants were using musicality to express themselves, to express kinself to me. And all of a sudden, my mind just started to open, because I had my science, my more engineering perspective that was like really intrigued on how did those little sensors work to make these sounds. And then I had the music side of me that all of a sudden took all the years of training and gave it a reason, a reasoning that was more than just the emotions that I feel when I watch a musical or something like that, but gave it an entire message that went beyond words, and started to make me realize that there was more here that I wanted to get to know. I wanted to get to know these beings. I wanted to understand what these beings were saying. And I wanted to figure out why they were talking to me. Yes,
it's exquisite. And how they contribute to your health, and how they contribute to the health of the planet. And we've oriented like over 300 trees on our property because Damanhur has this whole mission to reconnect trees around the planet. And so that's exciting to me. Well, okay, so I want to know, because there's a lot to you. I want to know, how do people find you if they want to find out about plant or be mentoring or leadership? How do they find you?
So I'm pretty easy to find in some ways, because having a unique name makes it simple. So my website is just my name, tigrillagardenia.com. And really all of this work that I do with the plants has informed the way that I coach and the way that I mentor. So really plants have provide us with so many models that are our true nature, because we are nature and we forget this. But when you work with plants, it's almost like the divide between humans and plants as different species starts to melt. I think it was Richard Powers in the Overstory that says, there are no individual species, we are all forest. And so you start to understand that. And that's really the core of my mentoring and my coaching, is that whole idea of we are nature. So you can find me on my website, which is just tigrillagardenia.com. Super simple.
Yes, everybody. And we'll put it in the video as well. So I ask every guest the same last question. This show is called Woman Awakening. Why do you think women awakening is an important thing in this moment?
What a great question. Right now, we're at a point where our planet, our species needs a new direction. The direction that we had for one period of time allowed it to build up an infrastructure, and it was wonderful. That infrastructure is so important. But today, that infrastructure needs to be driven differently. And it is the feminine that is the container. It is the feminine that is the collaborator. It is the feminine that allows us to take what has been created from that masculine energy and allow it to grow, nurture its growth. And so it is extremely important right now that women feel empowered and awake in order to then take those unique talents and put them in service to themselves as well as to our planet. Because honestly, extinction is around the corner. We don't have that much time. And we need a new collaborative form of leadership. And the beauty is that that feminine leadership, that women-run leadership is going to include men. We're not going to make that same mistake. This isn't about like pulling one down now for the other to come up. This is about both of us rising. So the woman rising and taking the man by the hand and rising up together so that we have the complete model. We no longer are separate, but we have that creative masculine energy with that containing, nurturing feminine energy.
It's beautiful because it lives within us anyway, the masculine and the feminine. So Tigrilla, thank you so much. I am so grateful that you're here. I love what you're doing on the planet. I'm grateful that you're on the planet and that I get to share you with my tribe. Thank you so much. And just know we hold you in our hearts.
Thank you so much for everything you are and everything you do.
So ladies, like I said, I do this every week. I hope you will come back. I hope you will come back each week and take the nuggets, the wisdom from these women and use it in your life. You know, there's nothing in the way. There's nothing that's stopping you because there's really nothing that stops you, the universe, right? We live in a field of potentiality and possibility. We get to step in there and we get to create. So just know that I am a champion for you. I am a champion for your change and your growth. And I am so grateful that I get to share Women Awakening with you. Many blessings, and I'll see you soon.